Hello and welcome back to Rhineland for the second part of Infamy. Infamy is a movie, and we are ready, I think, to play our game. We've got our deck shuffled, we've got our Infamy cards out with both players, but of course the first thing we need to do before we start any game is roll for our false morale. Now, because of the Roman choosing so many warriors in their force, they're going to get an automatic +2 on any rolls there. So we've rolled a 5, so that's going to put them all the way up. It's going to take them up to 11. And we've got a very similar thing for the barbarians, but they only get a +1 because they're not drilled. And oh, interestingly, they roll a 1, so they're going to be starting down at 8. So the Romans are already in a good position. What that can determine how punchy our sides feel about the forthcoming fight. So we're in a position now where, before we start the game, a small apology. Anybody who watched part 1 will have noticed that my Roman archers were in groups of 6, which, had they been Balearic slingers or Greek slingers, Rhodian slingers, that would have been correct because they would have been tribal allies. But these guys are auxiliaries, so they come in groups of 8. So my apology for that, but I'm sure it won't be the only mistake I make over these forthcoming series of films. So there you go, life, but not as we know it. So in we go. We're going to start the game and we're going to pull the first card. Interesting. Blue leader 1. Now, blue leader 1 is Adolf the Spearman, the German leader, because the Romans in this are red. Violets are blue. We have a choice to make here. Now, the main barbarian leader could come on with his force immediately and start raising further. He knows where the Romans are going to be coming from, but frankly, at this point in time, what's the point? He's much better off deferring that and leaving it till the next turn. So we'll leave him where he is. Next card out is Red Leader 2. Well, Red Leader 2 is the Roman Optio, habeas corpus, and his job is the secondary leader for the Roman legionaries. Now, he can come on the table now with one group of legionaries, leaving the main body, 2 groups with the centurion, but that's really not part of the plan, so we're going to leave that where it is. Now, next card out, Blue Leader 3. Blue Leader 3 is our Swaby leader, Egbert, and again, he's going to remain off the table because there's simply no point in deploying at this moment in time and showing the Romans your hand. Okay, next one out is somebody who's going to do something. It's our centurion, Nefarious Purpose, who's going to deploy onto the table. Now, the deployment zone that the Romans have is 24 inches wide and is 6 inches deep. Different troops can deploy different distances away. So if this was light tribal cavalry, they could deploy 15 inches away, which is a long way when you add that to the 6 inches. They could be heading right across the table. But these are more slower moving Roman legionaries, so they can just deploy 6 inches out from that. Now, we've got an opportunity here. He knows that the 2 barbarian leaders cards have been played already and they've chosen not to deploy. So this is an opportunity to get ahead of the game and get his legionaries on the table with their little cart ready to steal all the goodies from the poor Germanic farmers. So let's bring on the legion. And what we're going to do is we're going to deploy 6 inches in from our 6 inch deployment zone, and they're going to use a kind of reverse wedge. Now, by deploying like that, if the barbarians do attack either of those front groups, the rear group has a choice of where it's going to support. So it's quite a flexible defensive formation. If they were going in and attacking, a wedge is a great formation because it allows them to put maximum pressure at the front. So it's really a case of 2 up and 1 back and 1 up and 2 back. So there's nothing really that's changed in military tactics in 2,000 years. The Optio is going to go at the rear of the formation. His job is really to hold the guys in position and keep them fighting. The Centurion's going at the front, and they're going to come on with a magic cart ready to do their foraging. So let's see what the next card out is. Oh, thing to say, they have an option. They can come on in open order, or they can come on in close order. Close order is a predominantly defensive formation. Open order is predominantly an aggressive formation. At this point in time, as there's no enemy on the table, they're going to remain in open order. So we don't need to mark that. We do have some very attractive markers for close order, which we could just pop down in front of a unit, but we don't need to do that at this point in time because they're not doing it. Right, excuse me, blue leader 5. Well, there's an interesting one. That is our woodland archers, and they're definitely going to come on the table. They certainly want to be in a position where they're harassing these Romans. Missile missile shooting in this game is not a big effective weapon. You know, this is not an MG42. However, its incremental tiny little bits of damage can be enough to tip the balance when it comes to the all-important close combat. So the barbarians very much early on want to get their missile troops firing on the Romans, because if they can chip away, just doing one casualty can make a big difference. So our woodland archers are interesting people because they don't like operating out of cover, which is why they're really hunters rather than soldiers. So we're going to put them in the little garden there because they feel a bit more protected with the rubbishy old fence in front of them. I'm not sure it would do them any good because the Legion would just kick it down, but the rule is they are happier when operating from cover. So we're going to roll 6 dice. Now, they've got an opportunity here to darken the skies, which means playing 2 of their Signa cards and gaining a +1 to hit. The Romans also have an option here, which is to put their shields up and defend against it. Note that the barbarian player is having to do this in his turn sequence. The Roman player with their drill can do it out of the turn sequence. Now the barbarians, if we've got the barbarian slingers down who reduce armour who reduce heavy armour by 1 level down to medium level, I think playing Darken the Skies and burning 2 cards would be a wise thing to do. These are fairly rubbishy woodland folk, so we're not going to do that. However, the Romans definitely think it's worthwhile to play 1 of their Signa cards to put their shields up. And we have an attractive shield token, which we can place in front of them to show that they're doing that. By putting their shields up, that applies a -1 to the archer's roll to hit, so they're only hitting on 6s rather than 5s and 6s. And it also means that that Signa card is now in the deck, and that'll just cycle round and round, and when it's played, it will be in play for the rest of that turn. But the ones in your hand, you can keep in your hand until you play them. So let's roll the dice for shooting. So 1, 6. The way you shoot is that you select a target group. So this is a formation, obviously, but the barbarian player would select 1 group. The first hit goes on the group. The second hit will go on one of the supporting groups. The third hit will go on another supporting group if there are more supporting groups. And then if we had a 4th hit, it would go back round to the original group. So the majority of hits, if you get an odd number, are going to be on the target group, but the support of the groups around it does give you some protection. So we've only got 1 hit. We're going to roll the dice for that. It's a 6. See what I mean about chipping away? It's not particularly effective in terms of only 1 hit, but that 6 means that that is a hit, so is a kill. So a very effective bit of shooting for our woodland archers there. So let's move on. See, Tempest Fugit. Now, Tempest Fugit. Time flies. It signifies that the turn is about to end. What players may now do is use any Signa cards in play or any Signa cards they've got in their hands to activate any units on the table that have not yet been activated in this turn. Of course, the unique thing about the first turn is that every unit on the table must have been activated or it wouldn't be on the table. So we can ignore that at this point in time. There's nothing anybody can do with the Signa cards. Now, we have an unusual situation here that when you lose casualties to a missile fire, potentially it could be on the Centurion. Now, because there's only one man being killed, you can't roll under a 1. So the Centurion can't possibly be hit. However, if you watched the last video we did, we know that the Barbarians have got up their sleeve an Assassin card, which would apply a -2 to that roll. So they could choose at this moment in time to play that card, and on a 1 or a roll of 1 or 2, the Centurion could possibly be hit. However, the chances of that actually happening, even when you get the 1 or the 2, there's a 50% chance that it wouldn't be that. The chances are so slim that I think the Barbarian player is going to hold his Infamy card up his sleeve and wait for a bit of close combat, where if they can get 2 casualties, all of a sudden it makes it a lot more likely, especially if the Centurion, operating as a warlord, is using some of his additional oomph to get the fight really going, which we'll look at when we get to that point, presuming we do. Right, okay, so that's the end of the first turn. What I'm going to do is give the deck a shuffle, and then we'll come back and have another go. We're back, and I've changed a couple of the camera angles. You'll have to excuse me, I'm director and cameraman and grip and best boy all in one go due to the lockdown situation. So what we've got now, we're going to have 2 cameras, one giving a really good overview of the table and the other one having a little more focus on where the action is. If that changes, we'll reset everything and turn it around, but at the moment the action's heading over here. So when I talk to you, I'll be talking on camera 3, and when you're looking at the table, you'll be on camera 2, and the big overview will be on camera 1, which hopefully we'll cut to occasionally to give you some of the big picture. Camera 4 is going to be operating to do some nice close-ups, which hopefully we can inject into the game as we head along. Okay, so having shuffled up the deck, let's play the first card. Well, the first card out is a Signa card for the Romans in red. So that they don't have to play that immediately. It doesn't allow them to do anything at the moment, other than the Romans could potentially do some of their drill, like throw pillar, but there's nobody to throw pillar at. So we'll, or brace shields, but nobody's really threatening them, so we'll move on. And we've got leader 3. Well, that is the Batavian Auxilia. And what we're going to do is they're going to come on the table. Important for protecting flanks. One of the things that I'm very aware of is the fact that the Romans have got this on their left flank. The Romans have really got some potential problems with the Barbarians having a lot of deployment options right the way around over on my right to right way around over on my left. So effectively the Romans are advancing into this amphitheatre of potential threats. So what we're going to do is the area that they deploy from, the deployment areas here, they can deploy with skirmish troops 9 inches. So I'm going to move that tree out of the way, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring on some Roman Auxilia in skirmish formation. Now, if nothing else, what they're able to do is threaten that barbarian ambush point. Now that might not be a positive thing, because they may well find that the barbarians are responding to that by attacking them, which is not an unreasonable thing to do if you're a barbarian. However, the truth of the matter is that if you get attacked by them, at least you know where they are, and that does at least remove an element of the threat. But they are skirmishing in there. Okay, so leader 5 now, that is the Woodland Archers, funnily enough. They do have Signa cards up their sleeve, but they're not going to use them. The Romans have got their shields up, and we'll roll the dice to see what happens there. Wow, that's 4 hits, 4 sixes. That's pretty good shooting. So as we know, the Romans have got their shields up, so that'll be 2 on the first unit, which is nothing, 1 on the next one, nothing, and 1 on the back one. Well, there you go. I suppose when you roll 4 sixes, you ain't going to do it twice in a row, so that's unfortunate for the barbarians there. Blue 2. Now, that is Conrad Brownlegs, who's the subordinate German leader of the main German force. Now, he could come on with one group, but he's not going to. They're going to keep their powder dry there. Leader 4. Now, that is the Roman archers. What the Romans are going to do, this is red 4, what the archers are going to do, they can deploy 9 inches from their deployment zone. And they can also shoot over the heads of friendly troops, which the barbarians can't. So we're going to put them there, and they are in a nice position. So 8 figures, as we know. They're going to shoot over the heads of friendly troops and shoot towards the woodland archers, and they get 3 hits. Now, the woodland archers have got no armour, so we roll our dice, 2 sixes and a 1. I love it when 6s and 1s come up. It saves me looking it up on the play sheet. We know we've got 2 dead there, which is pretty nasty poke in the eye for the Germans. Now, leader 1, blue. Well, that begs a question, doesn't it? What are the barbarians going to do at this point in time? And I guess this is one of those situations where when you're playing solo, it's kind of it's as good to give the choice to the dice as anything else. I think realistically, the barbarians have got a threat here. This is what they've got to protect, and they do have auxilia coming through those woods, who are in skirmish order, which means that they're not going to get their bonus for fighting in drilled order, so they're somewhat down in fighting capability. A big blow at this point in time could be useful for the barbarian main force, but the problem they're going to have is potentially, on the other hand, to balance it out, potentially it means they're going to be using their main force to defeat the secondary Roman force, and then what state will they be in at the end of it? So I think it's a 50-50. So I'm going to go 1, 2 or 3. They don't attack, they stay off. 4, 5 or 6, they're going to ambush. 3, so they're thinking better of it at this moment in time. Let's carry on moving the cards along. So red leader 2 is our Optio, and nothing to do there. And blue leader 3. Adolf didn't want to come on the table because he didn't want to waste his main force attacking the subordinate Roman force, but I think Egbert of the Suebi is perfectly placed to deliver what the Germans will obviously be hoping is going to be a crushing blow. He's got a whole hand pack full of Signa cards, so he's going to use 2 of them to ambush, and we're going to bring him out, and we're going to see how an ambush works. So here we go, we've got Egbert here with his 2 groups, and an ambush happens. 12 inches is the distance you can go automatically and make contact with the enemy, but you can extend that by expending points of fervour. When you ambush, one of the reasons you use 2 cards to do it is that these guys will automatically gain further. They'll roll the dice to see exactly how much they get. Okay, they've rolled a 5, and so that means they attack. They've got 4 points of fervour each. That's going to mean they're pretty aggressive guys. They've got a ferocious charge, that's automatic. All troops who've got fervour will get a ferocious charge. And they will both gain an additional 2 dice in combat for each, 1 dice in close combat for each point of fervour, 2 points of fervour that they've got. So those guys going in there with 4 points of fervour are going to get an extra 2 dice for ferocious charge. They're also going to get an extra 2 dice for the 4 points of fervour each. So let's put those further. We're going to use green dice to represent that, very much a starting point for them, but they are going straight into contact with those skirmishing auxilia. And the auxilia, as they are skirmishing, would normally get an option to evade, which in this situation they'd probably rather like to do, but they can't because they've been ambushed, and an ambush assumes that you're caught on the hop, so you can't throw pillar or javelins in the case of auxilia. You can't brace, they certainly can't brace anyway because they're in skirmish order, so they've been caught on the hop, and we see the barbarians there are really able to make the best of that situation. So we're going to work out what dice we've got. Now, the way combat works is it breaks down into component parts. So we've got two groups fighting two groups, and what we'll do then is we'll cut that in half. We'll fight one group against one and then one group against the other one. However, we have to remember when we apply the results, this is one ongoing combat. So the skirmishing auxilia will get 8 dice because they're warriors. They don't gain 2 dice for being drilled, which they would do if they were fighting in open order or close order, but they're in skirmish order. So they get 8 dice. And the group, which has got Julius Batavius with them, will gain an extra 2 dice for him being there. Now they can pick up the Signa card that's in play, and they will do, to make that 13 dice. Now let's roll the dice to see what happens to them, and then we'll work out what happens to their opponent. So they roll their dice and they roll a 6 and a 5 and then a 5. So we'll put that to one side. We know they've got the 5s are shock, the 6s are potentially a kill and a shock, but your armour can save you from that. So they can't save from the 2 5s, but they could save from the 6, but we won't do that just yet. Now, we've got a barbarian warrior group. They've got 8 dice, same as the auxilia, 8 dice. However, they've got a ferocious charge, and that's 2 dice. And they've got 4 points of fervour, so that's another 2 dice. And they're going to take a big chance here and make this an aggressive attack, playing another 2 Signa. So they've used a lot of Signa in here, and that's going to give them another 2 dice. So they start with 14 dice. So let's roll and see if the dice gods are up with them this time. Interestingly, our Swabian friend, Egbert, has decided to fight with the other group. So this is just one group fighting there. And they roll, wow, that's a monster roll. They get 4 6s and 2 5s. So how does that work? So that's 2 points of shock on the Romans, but it's also 2 points of shock on the barbarians, but it can't be because they've still got fervour. So what we do is we take their 4 points of fervour and we reduce that to 2. So we can see, due to barbarian fervour, there's a bit of an unequal fight here. The Romans have got all their drill, although in the woods that's not a great thing for them, and they've got better armour, but the barbarians have got that fervour. Nevertheless, we're also going to roll to see what happens in terms of the kills on the Romans. Now there are 4 6s rolled there. Now that's potentially 4 kills and another 4 points of shot. But because these guys are in medium armour, they save on 5s and 6s. So let's see what they get. They make 2 saves. Wow, that's kind of really important. But the Optio is there, so let's roll the dice, see what happens. No, it's not him. So that's 2 people dead, so we'll take them out. And another 2 points of shock. So that goes up to 4, because when you make the armour save, you save not only the kill, but you also save against the shock. So we'll put the dead guys up there on the shelf, and we're going to roll for our Roman barbarians. They had just 1 6 on there, and they can save only on a 6 because they've got light armour, and they don't do so. So we take another man off, and their fervour is reduced to 1 point. Now that's interesting, because they're already in combat. In the ongoing combat, they don't gain a ferocious charge again because they're inert in the fight, and they don't get the bonus for having 2 points of fervour because they're only down to 1. So that's kind of, the Romans have taken the edge off, but my God, what a price they've paid. There are 6 guys there with 4 shot. Now let's have a look at the other side. We've got our Romans there again. So they've got 8 dice. They don't have an Optio with them, so we just roll straight 8 dice. and they get 1 6 and 1 5. Our barbarian friends, of course, gets 8 dice. However, it's a ferocious charge, makes it 10. However, it's an aggressive charge, makes aggressive attack, makes that up to 12, and they've got 4 points of fervour, so up to 14, and they've got expert, so up to 16 dice. So this is where they really want to win big, because these Roman auxiliary are buckling under the pressure in the forest. 2 points of shock only, 2 5s. That is not a good result for Egbert, who is obviously didn't get up early enough this morning. Right, so let's have a look at what the damage we get on the barbarians is. They've got 1 5, so we take their fervour down to 3, and we roll the dice for a saving roll, a 1, so no save there. So their fervour drops to 2, and they lose a man. We don't have to roll for a leader because you can't roll under 1. Now, combat, when it happens in 2 rounds. So we now fight the second round. So let's have a look at how that changes things. Now remember, our barbarians with all that fervour and aggressive attack and all the other bits and pieces, they now get 8 dice because it's a group of warriors, more than half strong. They've got no ferocious charge, they've got no aggressive attack, they've got only 1 point of fervour, which isn't enough to give them an extra dice, so they are straight down to 8 dice, which you can see the initial contact can be hard and bloody and nasty, but now it's really down to a hard slog. But they still have the advantage because they've got a little bit of fervour, which just holds off the shock a little bit longer. They only roll 1 5. That's really key for the Romans. No 6s. The Romans over 50%, so they get 8 dice, but they take 2 off for the 4 shock, and they put 2 back on for having the Octio in that part of the fight, and they roll 2 5s. So all the barbarian fervour is taken off, that last point is taken off, and a point of shock goes on there, because we don't roll any armour saves. Shock is representing exhaustion, it's representing fear, it's representing morale, and the Romans equally we don't get to save, so they're up to 5 shock. Now, complete draw there. In a draw situation, nothing happens, the fight will continue. However, if there were more shock than men, they would start falling back. There aren't, so we don't worry about that. Now let's have a look on the other side. As we know, those warriors have got 8 dice, but they do have 2 points of fervour, so they add a dice, and they've got Egbert, the rather sleepy-headed Swaby, who's going to try and do better this time. Let's roll the dice and see what he gets. Well, he gets 2 6s and 2 5s, so that's pretty reasonable. Our legionaries, on the other hand, they get 8 dice, but they've got 2 points of shock, so that takes it down to 7. So let's see what they can do in response. Well, they're not doing badly either. They get 2 6s and a 5. So immediately we'll take the 2 5s and we'll put the shock on the Romans, so that takes them up to 4. And we'll roll 2 dice for their armour saves on the 2 6s. They roll a 4 and a 1, so they fail. So they lose 2 guys dead as well. Now, what happens to our barbarian friends? Well, they've got a 5, so their fervour reduces to 1. And they've got 2 6s. They need 6s because they're only lightly armour, and they get 1. But they don't get 2. So they lose a man, and their fervour is all gone. So the Romans are holding that line, and that combat now reignites when the next leader in that fight is activated. So the cards are really determining what could happen there. The Germans have burnt through a lot of Signa cards in order to do that, but they were rather hoping that that would go better for them, but the scales are still balanced in their favour, I think. So leader 4 blue. Leader 4 blue is the slingers, Germanic slingers. Now they're looking at the legion, obviously, and they are going to deploy quite aggressively. They can deploy 12 inches from an ambush point, and they are going to really, they're looking to harass the Romans. They can't go within 4 inches of them, but they can stand there, and they can, if they have the flags, signet cards, darken the sky. Well, they do have 2 signet cards in their hand, but burning them at this point in time, that's their last 2, they're probably not going to do it, which is a shame, because if the one thing they really want to do is start hammering away at the Legion and getting some kills in. So they're going to roll 5s and 6, so the target group is here, nothing. Oh no, it reduces their armour by 1 level, so 4 is good enough. They're treated as medium armour in this situation, and the other one is a 1, which is no good. So what have we got next? Leader 1. Now that is our Legion. Well, he doesn't like those people shoving things in his face. So what we're going to do there is he's going to advance in open order, and he rolls 5. So as he advances 5 inches, they will come within 4 of the skirmishers, and they will automatically withdraw. So you have an automatic evade there for them, and they're going back 9 inches. Doesn't matter, they'll next turn they'll simply turn around and shoot, but it does mean that, you know, getting in somebody's face can sometimes harass them and get them to do something that they don't want to do. The first thing he did was take the shock off on that group, so I failed to see that there. So he's got 3, as a status 3 leader, he's got 3 command initiatives. The cart will activate automatically when he goes. We roll for that, even though it's just plodding along, because if you roll a double 1 or you roll a double 6, a wheel falls off or it bogs in. I can't remember which way round it is, but either way the result's unpleasant, and you don't want it. We've got 1 card left, so I'm guessing it's Tempest Fugit, and it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to shuffle them back up, and we are going to go back in with the next turn. So it's interesting. The Legion are looking like they're pushing on, and the Batavians on their flank, well, they're having a bit of trouble, but the Romans can at any point burn signet cards to rally shock. It's the part of their drill, and they have got a big handful of signet cards, but they can't do it on the turn end. So I think what we'll do is we'll see the first card played, Leader 1. Right. The Romans have got 5 unplayed signet cards. They're going to keep 2 in hand, they're going to play 3 of them to reduce that shock down to 3 and 3. Just keeps it balanced. As I say, that is nothing to do with Leader 1 activating. This can happen at any time in the turn, because Roman drill happens at any point you want. So the first thing the Romans want to do is not to activate their centurion and then have his go and then find out the barbarians are activated. They want to get that down, so they're going to chuck those signet cards straight in the deck, and they go in the discard pile. So now what is the centurion going to do? Well, interestingly, he has got not a lot to his front. He's got 2 groups of harassing oiky gits. Unfortunately, is he out of range of his archers? He is out of command range of his archers. Should have brought bloke the trumpet, but he didn't. The big issue for him is he's worried about these deployment points where the barbarians can ambush from at any point in time. But at the end of the day, he can't be too scared because he's Roman. So he's going to roll 2 dice. He clearly is a bit scared because he's rolled 3. So we're just going to keep that formation, but it's going to slightly wheel. They can move at the incline up to 45 degrees. We'll roll for our cart just to make sure it doesn't roll anything crazy. They can move at an incline up to 45 degrees, or they can stop and wheel. So frankly, it's the type of rule that you have to have in there, but really there's flexibility in the movement if you're playing it sensibly. You don't need protractors to work out that what you're doing is legitimate. Right, what can he do? If he's in 6 inches, he can chuck pillow, which he isn't. He's just out, so we won't do that. There's not a lot for him to do at this moment in time, so we'll crack on through the deck. Leader Blue 3. He's a Swaby. Whoa, whoa, whoa. the fight continues. Now at this point in time the Romans could say, oh, I'm going to burn those other cards and try and do something clever, but I think they're feeling a little bit happier because the enemy have got no further, and because they've reduced their shock down to more manageable levels. Let's see how wise that is. So on this side, because the whole combat reignites, not just the bit that the leader is in, on this side the Romans have still got 8 dice, goes down to 7 because they're on 3 points of shock. That's the important thing. That's why I took it down to 3 rather than 4. There's no real advantage in taking it down to 2 because you'll still lose 1 dice as you will at 3. So if you've got a very limited thing, the odd numbers is the way to do it. So they're down to 7 dice and they get 2 for the Optio. Let's roll and see what they get. They've got 1 6 and 2 5s. Okay, let's put that there. And on the other side, you've got barbarians who, whilst they haven't got any further, do have only 1 point of shock. So they're going to roll 8 dice and they just get 1 shock. So let's roll for that on the Romans. They rolled a 6, so they shrug it off. The barbarians, on the other hand, the 2 5s will push their shock up to 3, and then we roll for their armour save, and they manage it. It's a 6. Well done, you Germanic hairy people. So now, on this side of the table, we have got the Romans 8 dice for warriors, but they've got 3 points of shock, as we know, so they're down to 7. They roll the dice. Another good roll. 2 6s and a 5. And the Germans, they get 8 dice. They have no fervour, but they've equally got no shock. And they get 2 dice for Egbert of the Suebi. So, are they going to blime us? 5 6s. Do you feel lucky? Let's see how the Romans do with their armour. They don't save any. So they lose 5 guys. And the bloke who's left has got 8 points of shock. Now we'll come back to that and do that in a moment. So we'll fight the whole melee across the whole thing before we apply any results. So the only result left is to apply 1 point of shock to these Germans and then roll 2 dice for their armour saves, and they do save 1, so they lose another chap, but their shock goes up to 2. So all in all, pretty colossal turn for our Swabian friend there, because these guys have obviously lost by more than 2, which means they fall back for every point of shock they have on the group excess. So there's one man with 8 shock, so he goes back 7, at which point he goes, I think I might rout here, and he rolls 2d6 and goes directly away from the enemy. And at that point in time we take him off the table because he's got so much shock it will take him all weekend to rally it off. And we roll a dice on the force morale table. Well, fortunately for the Romans, they've rolled a 1, and that is a warrior group breaks or wiped out, which is 1 point off the Roman force morale. So they started really high, but that goes down to 10. Now, that's an interesting one, because the barbarians will now follow up 2 inches, which doesn't do them a lot of good actually in this immediate situation. But it does, because they can't support, because they're not lined up with the unit that is still fighting, but they have passed the frontal line of the Romans. So next, if the combat goes on another turn, they can attack them in the flank, which is nasty. So we're going to fight that again, because we've got a second round to fight there. So we've got our Romans, and they have got 8 dice, down to 7, but up to 9 because they've got the Optio. So they've really got to try and make this work. 1 5 puts a shock on the Germans, just puts them up to 4. So they were at 7 dice because they were at 3 shock and no other factors in there, and they roll 2 6s and 2 5s. So the Germans are really getting the best of this exchange. So that shot automatically goes up to 5, and let's roll for those armour saves. They need 5s and 6s. They don't get them. Let's roll a dice. 2 dead. So does the Optio go? No. 2 dead means they've lost by 2 or more, which means they go back 1 inch for every point of shock on the group, and there is now 7 points of shock on that group. There are 4 guys in the Optio, which actually does them a favour because they have disengaged from the combat. The Germans will push up 2 inches, which actually reassembles their mob together in an organised manner. But those Germans are really suffering, and that is going to leave the Legion with a hell of a job to do, because the Swabians have really knocked some holes by catching those legionaries in the woods in those auxiliaries in the woods in skirmish order. They've caught them out of the right tactical shape and done them in. So all that rubbish about what a good idea it is to find an enemy by getting them to ambush you doesn't always work. So there we have it, and I think that's a good point to leave the action here and think for a moment about what we've seen in the second video in this series. We'll obviously be carrying on this game in the 3rd edition. So what we've seen are that when we get into combat, it's a very simple system. You're rolling 8 dice for warriors, which covers the bulk of the troop types, and then the result can either be a kill or shock or both, or a complete miss depending on what dice you roll. We've seen that we then have an armour save, which can determine how kills are applied. But really, I think hopefully what that has shown you is that combat is relatively simple and relatively easy. And from the purpose of this game, we've seen that the Romans are not unbeatable. These, of course, are auxilia. The Legion, as yet, haven't been in combat, but they are presented with a very interesting situation that the guys who are there meant to be covering their flanks for them are kind of in pretty bad order. So in the next thrilling episode, we'll see how the Legion carry on and get on. If you've got any questions or queries, don't forget to just post a note below. We hope to have this, the next edition for the second period of this game, up within 24 hours. And then we're going to be carrying on with a series of videos to show you how different forces operate. We've got the Germans fighting here. We hope to have an opportunity to show you the Britons and the Gauls, to show how they're really very different, and also how the terrain will be different as well. So hopefully that's given you some idea of what's going on. It's unfortunate for this video that the bulk of the fighting took place in the wacky wild woods, but there we go. We hopefully we'll get something a little bit more out in the open next time for you to see. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you very soon.